Brothers and sisters, cats and chicks, welcome, welcome, welcome. Yes, indeed, you have slipped through the cracks. Once again, I'm going to sit down and fill you in on some records that are pretty obscure, but are really, really fun, and, shouldn't be forgotten. These records shouldn't be forgotten, as old as they might be, as much as they might not be part of what's happening now, in the now world of today. They still deserve to be around, and they still deserve to be recognized. Now, most of the records that I'm going to cover from my vast vault here, they're basically music-oriented, but there's other kinds of records that, by their very nature, they somewhat slip through the cracks because they're like a fringe part of it. They're not the main focus. And one of those is children's records. I mean, children's records, they come and go. Some of them, when they hit super big. They have their big moment, but then, that's it. You never ever see them again. They vanish off the face of the earth. I can't even really think of ones that have become standards when it comes to kids' records. I would say maybe the Sesame Street records, because that show seems to be eternal and timeless, and a lot of those records really were very, very funny and very, very talented. But I want to talk about one that predates the Sesame Street records. This is from 1958, believe it or not, and it's called A Child's Introduction to Outer Space. This is the cover right here. Great, fantastic old 50s style outer space artwork there on the cover. Just grabs your eye immediately. I love that little space station there that seems to be floating above the rocket. It kind of looks like a peace logo with a pencil jammed through it or something like that. But that's what they thought space stations and satellites and stuff would look like back then. And this record is really fascinating because it's a mixture of facts about outer space, but it's also a great mixture of songs. And some of the songs on this record are absolutely amazing. They're like a mixture between kind of jazz standards. Like there's one called Little City in Space. You could totally hear Tony Bennett or Frank Sinatra singing it. Little city in space. It's totally got that vibe. But a lot of the other ones really sound like they could be in musicals. They've got that kind of musical vibe. You could see a bunch of dancers in space suits and some Busby Berkeley style photography with the big dance numbers and stuff like that with planets and rockets, and you can see it happening. But I think it's a really clever way to do it for kids because you get some songs, you get some facts, and of course, great sound effects too. You hear rockets blasting off. I love they add that urgent sound of the classic old teletype or the teletape machine playing in the background there for all the big news-oriented items. They've got that classic sound that you'd always hear in the reporter's room in those old 50s movies. And so, a really, really fun record. A couple interesting notes about it as well. I don't know if you can see this. I'll hold this up as best I can. But the guy that did the music on this is a guy by the name of Jim Timmons. And apparently Jim Timmons basically made a career out of doing children's records. He did a whole ton of them through his career. And he even eventually ended up at Sesame Street, where he did tons of work for them right up until he passed away, including he produced many albums. He was an editor on lots of the records. This is one of the ones he produced, one of my favorite Sesame Street records from when I was younger. At Home with Ernie and Bert. This features the notorious Ernie Plays the Drums skit, where he just drives Bert up the wall by playing the drums. It's good stuff. So Jim Timmons, a major guy in children's music and children's records, he's on this record. And also, the name that gets the biggest prominence on the front cover there, you can see it, Willie Ley, right there, Willie Ley. Willie Ley was kind of the biggest advocate for space exploration I've ever heard of. He was a German scientist. He was born in 1906 in Germany, and he was a German scientist, and he was really an explorer at heart, and he was really fascinated by exploration, and he figured that in this day and age, when he was young in the 20s, that the only real place to explore is outer space. So he became fascinated with outer space, and even back in the 20s, they were talking about ways of building rockets and trying to get to the moon and trying to get to Mars and things like that. So he was really, really fascinated by that. Now, interestingly enough, by the time the Nazis came to power in Germany, he had been a scientist for a while, and he kind of got scared by their philosophy and wasn't really a big fan of them, and rightly so, as history has proven. And so he got out of there. He got out of Germany in 1936 before World War II started, went to Great Britain, and then eventually went to the United States. And in the United States, he became, as I said, the biggest advocate for space travel in the world. He wrote I can't number the number of books. He wrote countless books about space travel, especially in the late 50s, 57, 58, 59. All these different books about rockets, about satellites, about weather satellites, about space stations, about space pilots. Tons and tons of books. And he was really the guy that put the space travel bug in the public's eye, because he was just such a big advocate of it. He appeared on television, which was a big thing, talking about outer space. So the guy was really the advocate for space travel all the way up until he died in 1969. Somewhat ironically and very sadly, he died a month before the U.S. landed on the moon for the very first time in 1969. So that's kind of sad. But Willy Ley, definitely there would have been no space travel without the influence of Willy Ley. So there you have it. A very, very fun record with a little bit of neat history attached to it. And really, I love the cover. Like, that cover is absolutely amazing. And a really fun record to listen to. So if you're into that lounge exotica thing, I think you'd get a kick out of it. And hey, parents, I would play this for my kids. I would play this. Just give it to them as a history lesson. A Child's Introduction to Outer Space. A record that has slipped through the cracks, but now you know about it. Thanks to Dr. Mouth and Slipped Through the Cracks right here. I'll be back again with another piece of vinyl goodness from the library next time. And I thank you for watching.